Let's face it, cyber attackers have the advantage. ExtraHop is on a mission to help you take it back. Regain the upper hand with security that can't be undermined, outsmarted, or compromised. When you don't have to choose between protecting your business and moving it forward, that's security uncompromised. See how it works in the full product demo, free online at securityweekly.com/extrahop. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
And welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. InfoSec World 2021 is proud to announce its keynote lineup for this year's event. Hear from Robert Urjevic, plus heads of security at the NFL, TikTok, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Stanford University, and more. Plus, Security Weekly listeners save 20% on Digital Pass registration. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register now. Also, Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person this December 5th through 7th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. We're excited to announce some of our early speakers that we've got lined up here. Leslie Carhart, John Strand, Alyssa Miller, Dave Kennedy, O'Shea Bowens, Marina Chiavata, Patrick Coble, Chris Eng, Eric Escobar, Nick Leghorn, Michael Schlatt, Kevin Johnson, Justin Kohler, Jay Beal, Trenton Ivey, and Ryan Cobb. Visit securityweekly.com/unlocked to register and check out our rockstar lineup.
Are you sure you got everyone in the lineup? I'm just checking.
It's
a long list.
Should I do it again?
No.
I can do it again. No, I'm not going to do it again. Now, the Enterprise Security lineup. Weekly news. What, Bill? Were you volunteering to do it?
What, the news?
Yeah. No, the names.
I already
went through the names.
I did my time in the news.
A lot of funding, huh?
I do have
funding.
I might be taking us off script, but I can do that, right?
Yeah, it's the news.
Awesome. So I was reading in the Washington Post this morning this article about the FBI holding back ransomware decryption keys, or a ransomware decryption key from businesses so that they could run operations. Yeah. Targeting. So, they're looking to target hackers. They're running an operation. They're holding back on the decryption key that businesses need so they could run this operation. And a good friend of mine in the security world, who you all might know, Mark Weatherford, he shared this story, which is how I found it. And he made the observation that, he said, okay, I get it. I really do. There are always trade-offs to be considered when you're revealing any kind of intelligence-related information, but that, they do this and most of the public ends up not understanding. And that's how we contribute to the world we see today, where people just don't trust anything government is doing. So for our purposes, I look at it as, as this one other thing that just undermines security, but also does it in a way that feeds into this larger trust problem that has created the politics we have today.
Yeah, but here's the thing about that. If the government comes out and says, hey, for this strain of ransomware, like, we have the key, like, they might as well just give businesses the key, right? So they have to be very careful what information they're releasing. Now, if they just say generically, we've got a key for some, ransomware strain, there's a lot of them out there, and I can't imagine that every single ransomware group that's using ransomware in some capacity is going to go, oh, we should all change our keys because the U.S. government has one set of someone's ransomware. And the thing is, if they release the key and people start decrypting their stuff, the attackers are just going to change the key. And not only that, they're also going to know that, hey, we've got a mole in our organization, or we've been compromised in some way because somehow the U.S. government got, a branch of the U.S. government law enforcement got the key. And so I kind of, it depends on what level of information is being released, but I think businesses have to be understanding that they can't just like give this stuff away because it's going to undermine an investigation, and also it could end up hurting you. The attackers are just going to change the key. Like BitLocker went through this, I think, twice. They found the key. Now they're not law enforcement, but they got the key and they released it, and then the attackers changed the key.
But if the business is losing $300,000 a day while they're down, is the government going to reimburse that? I mean, that's rough on the business side.
I look at what you just said, Paul, and I look at what Mark Weatherford said, and I scratch my head. I don't have the answer, but I'm always like, where is that middle ground where everything works better?
Yeah, because I mean, some of it too. I mean, to play devil's advocate, my own commentary. It's not the secret is not necessarily the key. The secret that law enforcement should be protecting is how they got the key. And maybe in releasing it, you can move backwards to figure out how they got it. But like the real secret is who's their mole inside of what cyber criminal organization that got the key for them. Or maybe they have their own malware from the U.S. government that's implanted on an attacker's computer somewhere. And now someone's going to start digging for that, right?
And I think most businesses are going to totally get that and understand that, unless it's them that needs that key now.
Yeah, right.
We need.
If you're in crisis mode, all that what I just said goes right out the window. You're right, Adrian.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, it's different when it's happening to you.
Right. Like we're really sick. We have a horrible virus, and you have the cure, but you can't share it. Thanks.
Yeah, but for the greater good, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen Hot Fuzz. The greater good.
It's been a long time. I think I've seen the movie. Maybe I have. I have seen. It was a long time ago.
All right. So yeah, none of this funding is really super interesting on its own. There's some interesting ones here, like Kolide. I haven't heard about Kolide in a while. Last I heard about Kolide, I heard that they were having some troubles. Like I thought one of the founders left or something like that. People talking about money issues and stuff like that. But it looks like they're pretty solid today. They're raising funds. Raised $17 million.
I'm curious.
So they're the other OS query based commercial product.
Yes, correct. So they're both Uptycs and Kolide. Both use OS query.
Except Kolide went in more of like a device management, fleet management kind of direction.
Yeah, that was my question for you. Is what differs between open source Kolide and Uptycs? I know Uptycs gives you a lot of really great indicators of compromise and packages that up. So like when I implemented Fleet and OS Query on the open source side, I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like I can just start asking it questions. And then I'm like, wait, what questions do I want to ask it? Right? You get this really cool thing, but you got to know what to ask it in order to uncover some of those indicators. And I've integrated it, or it comes prepackaged and integrated with Security Onion. Well, it's on the server. You have to go install that on all of your clients and set that up, which isn't that bad. And it's a great console, and I'm starting to learn like what questions to ask it, how to correlate it to other data. But I've seen the demos from Uptycs. I'm like, I know what you get when you pay Uptycs for a product. Like that's super polished and super, super awesome. And I was curious, like if I went with the commercial Kolide, like what would I get?
Yeah. So Kolide is much more kind of the like MDM, unified device management. How many? So it's going to answer all those questions for you because it's getting all that rich OS query data. Right. So it'll tell you which disks aren't encrypted. Compliance type information.
What
which
software is installed, and what I can query like what software is installed on all of my workstations. Yeah. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Now, can you tell me like which software is vulnerable on there? That's not in there. by the way.
No, that's not. That's more the Uptycs thing. But of course, the pricing is going to be completely different between the two as well. Like Kolide, is going to work for small businesses unless they've changed things. They used to have a free tier. Looks like maybe they get rid of that. They do have a free trial, but I don't think they have the free tier anymore.
Gotcha.
So $6 a device per month. Pretty easy to sign up. Throw out a credit card and get moving with it and use it to manage your fleet of systems.
Yep. Security Onion's great too. I'll have full reviews on it. On certain aspects of it, there's so much there that you'll probably see it in like multiple group reviews, multiple tech segments and all that stuff, because it's a huge conglomeration of a lot of different open source and free technologies. Waza, which is like a host-based intrusion detection system, is in there, which is it's a heavier lift to get that on a bunch of workstations. Like to deploy that at scale is a little more work. OS Query comes pre-packaged, so like I just download the pre-packaged agent on Linux or Windows, and it just works and starts talking back to. They have an open source version of Fleet in the Security Onion, so you can query that separately from your Kibana interface, which correlates everything together. And so I have a network sensor that runs Zeek, and then you get all of the. It uses beats from Elastic to get logs from both Linux and or Windows. But all that, like, you're configuring manually on your own. It's not that bad. I really like it, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something where somebody is going to have to be the expert on it.
Yep.
You're going to have somebody dedicated to it that knows where to go change that configuration and where to monitor for the disk filling up and that kind of stuff.
Because it uses Jinja with Salt Stack to push out all the configuration for all of the different components. So it's not
like already you've mentioned at least a dozen different product names,
and that's what I'm trying to learn and relearn and come up to speed with, is all of these different technologies that are included with the Security Onion, which is very aptly named. But if you put the time in, you can get a lot of really great visibility. Like, the dashboards are really awesome.
Yeah, anybody looking to get into InfoSec, and just needs a place to start, go set up Security Onion. There's so much useful stuff that you'll learn in the process, and then once you get it set up, you're perfectly positioned to do all sorts of stuff and integrate and plug in all kinds of other tools.
And it's a good proving grounds too for, we mentioned a couple of commercial products as well. It's a good proving ground. And then when you evaluate those other products, you can appreciate what value they're bringing and help justify some of that value.
Yeah, you can be like, wait a minute, this commercial product, hey, this is all the same stuff I've got running in my home lab. It's just labeled differently.
Yeah, or a
lot of folks use Zeek. Yes, sure. It's very customized, but you also get Zeek in Security Onion, right?
Yeah, I think what you're paying for are those analytics, correlation, and making that easy in an interface that anyone can log into and start helping you make decisions about what deserves attention and what doesn't. Right? It's all about cutting down that time of identifying those indicators of compromise and the real ones and responding to them.
We need to start having dedicated segments just for talking about lab stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
Back to the news. Let's go over a few more of these fundings before moving on. Stairwell is kind of interesting. It's a guy that the founder of Chronicle, Google Chronicle, started a new company, and apparently was mysterious until the other day. It came out of stealth, and a lot of breathless stuff in there. Some of the claims seem a bit much, and it looks like a threat intel platform. So there are a few screenshots in there, and I'm just having trouble seeing what the excitement's about there.
It's exactly what I said. If you can bring in a solution that does what it claims, a threat hunting platform that aims to help organizations determine if they were compromised now or in the past, that we all want that. And there's dozens and dozens of solutions that can help you with that or claim to help you with that. The trick is figuring out the difference of ones that are just making the claim versus actually helping you do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So like with a lot of these, we'll see. We'll have to see more of the product, before we can. Some of these, it's just at the Series A stage, their messaging just isn't very good yet, and they're still trying to put together that elevator pitch in a way that, as I mentioned in the Chris Cochran interview, makes that light bulb go off, makes you realize, oh, that's what this is doing. That can be tough in security. There's a company called Ketch that raised, they came out of stealth earlier this year, raised a $23 million Series A, and then 6 months later, just recently raised another $20 million. So apparently somebody's excited about what they're doing, and a lot of somebody's, and they're looking to automate how customer data is handled based on their privacy preferences. So my read on this is they're actually connecting what you say on the front end as a customer you want the company to do with your data to the back end, so that in theory, you actually have kind of some direct control over what happens with your data. So provide some transparency, I guess, and some automation.
I think that's a great point of view on the problem of how you handle customer data with respects to compliance. Obviously that's a very GDPR focused solution, but most of the companies out there today that are dealing with any level of customer data, ourselves included, have to comply, or are compelled to comply. Or in our case, we want to comply, right? I want you to tell me if you want me to wipe out your data. What this is solving is how do I do that? What was I collecting, and where did I store it, and how can I be sure that I removed all of it? I want to be able to answer those questions definitively, right? And if this can help you do it, I really like it.
I'm going to create a product that connects the "we care about your security" page on a company's website to actual security metrics in the back end.
Right.
So that page will actually change depending on how those security metrics are doing. So one day you go there, it might say, we take your security very seriously. Another day it might say, we take your security sort of seriously.
Because there's a database that we can't figure out how to get integrated. Yeah, I mean, it happens.
Yeah, of course. That's it's a fun thought, but I do see this benefiting both sides. Where it creates a bit more trust with the consumer between them and the company that has access to their data or control over their data, and makes it a bit easier for the company to keep track of stuff and manage it. So yeah, I can see why a lot of people are excited about that, because that's definitely a huge topic right now. Neosec emerges from stealth. This is an API security company. They say they can identify. This is almost like deja vu. Didn't we have one a couple of weeks ago that said we can automatically find all your APIs and document them for you?
We did. That was last week.
And this one's saying
and the week before that.
It's like Groundhog Day on the enterprise security news here. So yeah, aims to identify all APIs used within an organization based on existing logs to constantly maintain an inventory of APIs and even generate documentation for previously unknown APIs. Also discovers APIs transferring sensitive data. It sounds like they're not in line, so I'm not sure how they're doing that. And detects vulnerable or misconfigured APIs. So it'd be really interesting to do throw some of these into a lab and see how they're doing some of the stuff.
I really just, as a consumer, in a consumer of this type of solution, I really just want this integrated with my DAST scanner.
Yes.
I don't want to have to manage a separate solution from my DAST scanner. I mean, really, that's my ask. So I think one of the DAST scanners needs to acquire and or develop this capability and include that, because I want to manage. These are all flowing like in the same workflow as my DAST scanner runs, find some issues with some of my web apps, all of my web apps maybe. Then I got to take that those issues and I have to send them to the right people so they can fix them, that's the same team, conceivably, or similar teams, same workflow. Your developers versus your operations people are likely all working on the same DevOps team, they need to address those issues. So this is like the same workflow process, same type of issues. Someone's got to go fix something somewhere, and it has to do with most likely all of my web apps.
So it's interesting. I actually, there were a couple API security companies around about a decade ago, and they found they were just kind of early to market. The demand wasn't quite there, and I think now is definitely the time. But absolutely, I'm sure we'll see some consolidation here. We'll see some acquisitions, and these will fold into some of the various AppSec vendors here. One of them will go into Prisma Cloud, one of them go into Wiz, into Sneak.
And I think I'm asking that because of the market segment that we're in. We're very much small business, small enterprise right here at CRA, and there's a lot of companies that fall in that same profile. I think when you get to a larger enterprise, if I were on the security team, I'd say, you know what, we got to bite the bullet and get a point solution, because we have 2,000 web apps that are accessing probably exponentially more APIs. Every web app conceivably could have 3 APIs that they're communicating with. Yeah. So I need a solution at this level, and if I got to go somewhere else to get it, then I'm going to do that, right? But I'd still think eventually it will be better to get it from one place.
And I think I said it last week also, but I think it would be kind of neat to have some of this built into Postman. To a tool like Postman, where you're going to do API testing and management and that kind of stuff. And it'd be nice to have it built into a tool like that, where you could automatically generate that documentation, test vulnerabilities, validate those vulnerabilities in the tool.
Yeah, where I think the kind of point solutions could benefit is not all the APIs are ones that I've written. Some of the APIs are in the cloud, and I can configure them, so I still have some level of responsibility there. And then I also feel like there's APIs that are just there in some product I've implemented somewhere that are outside of my control. I have very little configuration control over.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to have some kind of dashboard where you could look at all those and categorize them by, here's mine, here's ones I can't really do anything with, here's some that are configurable, and be able to do some threat modeling with that, some design and architecture planning, maybe get rid of some stuff you don't need.
Yeah, and some are in reverse. Some, that last category is like, we use the YouTube API. Am I using that securely or not? That's sometimes maybe some configuration on like your YouTube side. I'm picking like the worst API in the world, but sometimes it's configuration on that side. Sometimes it's in my code. Am I authenticating it to it correctly? And I would love also if these solutions could tell me if there's a change to that API that I need to be aware of.
Yes.
Because usually
you're about to break all your stuff.
Right? But usually you have a grace period, and where you find out about but then you got to be aware of that grace period. Hopefully you find out about it in the earlier stages of that grace period, so you have more time.
We put a press release on our website. Didn't you see it?
Exactly. I'd love to have the solution go, you're using this API for Dropbox. I'll use another example. And in 90 days, like, you have to change the way you authenticate to this new method. And if you don't, it's going to break. So that's both a security thing and an operational risk all rolled into one.
You should check our blog every day. We blogged about it.
Right. There needs to be a scraper in there.
Oh, one more funding here. Founders Fund values identity startup Persona at $1.5 billion. And so a couple interesting things here. What they're doing is kind of like, maybe a background check is the wrong comparison here. It's more identity authentication, making sure you're really you that's holding your smartphone or something like that. Making sure it's really you before you do certain sensitive things in an app. So they've got integrations with DoorDash, with some of these Uber-like services out there, where they have a lot of contractors working for them and stuff like that. So very, very interesting. I can see how this would be a huge market, but the valuation of 1.5 billion, that's on 10 to 15 million in revenue. So 150x valuation.
Those are the people on Shark Tank that like get laughed out of the tank for their valuation alone, and it hurts them. You can see that trend.
Yeah, except that this isn't the company valuing them at this. I don't know exactly how valuations work, but they're not saying it themselves. I think that's part of.
It's an independent valuation. You can get those. As well.
So interesting. Like I could see how that would be huge and would grow very quickly. Kind of like a Stripe or a Plaid. It's one of those things where, everybody starts integrating it within their products. It becomes one of those necessary components in certain kinds of mobile apps. All right, we've got one acquisition. F5 picked up ThreatStack. So this is an interesting market. This was kind of like, what if the best way to do cloud security was to give you an agent that you install in your instances?
What if you don't have instances?
Right. So most of them did pivot to where they started to do API integrations and things like that. So if you remember Dome 9 and Cloud Passage, they were also direct competitors of ThreatStack. And I think this market kind of fizzled a bit. So Checkpoint picked up Dome 9 back in 2018.
Right.
And Cloud Passage got picked up by Fidelis, if you can believe that. Fidelis Cybersecurity, who themselves got picked up by a private equity shop. And I didn't realize Anoop Ghosh was over at Fidelis. He's the CEO there. He was the founder of and CEO of Invincia Security, who was acquired.
I worked with him actually right when Sophos acquired them. So for a few months, I worked pretty closely with him, and that was an interesting experience.
That sounds like code for many things.
No, good guy. I've enjoyed watching his trajectory. That was actually that experience was my crash course into how machine learning works.
Yes, me too. Me too, actually.
Just how those pieces were going to fit into something like what Sophos does. So it was great, but yeah, just such a smart guy that keeping up with him could be a challenge, but that was more my problem.
Yeah, I always enjoyed my conversations with him. Nothing but good things to say about Anoop. And one of the cool things he did with Invincia is Invincia had a wholly owned subsidiary that was kind of hands-off management-wise, kind of completely separate, called Invincia Labs. And they did some DARPA projects and stuff like that. And ultimately, their original product was kind of like a microsegmentation isolation type product. I think their only close competitor was Bromium was really their only other close competitor. And the idea was your Office apps and your web browser, you'd isolate from the rest of the system. So if it got compromised, if it got hit, you could just wipe and reload it without having to reformat the entire system.
And that's an amazing technology, but what I hear is the implementation and maintenance is a bear.
Yeah. Overhead is big. And it's and for a lot of people, it was very niche. It wasn't something they were going to buy licenses for every computer in the organization.
It works. It works really well, though. I mean, if you talk to the folks at Bromium, they're like, "Wow, we send each other malware like all the time." Yeah, that's the kind of solution you want, right? Like we can send each other malware all the time. It doesn't matter because everything's in its own containerized system.
Well, if you're using the right hardware, though, that was always the tough thing with Bromium. It was it was hardware dependent. You had to have, it took them a while to get to Mac, but in the early days, you had to have an i3, i5, or i7 chipset Windows system with enough RAM, and enough CPU to handle that overhead. So I think that was their killer is,
hey, if I'm building computers for everyone in the organization, we'll be fine on that front.
Yeah. But it didn't work on AMD though.
Yeah.
Didn't work on AMD.
That's the trade-off on those hardware platforms.
So that was kind of the killer there. But I thought it was really interesting because I was talking a lot with both organizations, and basically telling them, hey, the writing's on the wall. Like you got to find something else to pivot into. And Anoop had the machine learning, the kind of next gen AV technology in Invincia Labs. So he kind of took that out of Invincia Labs and built a product out of it. And then Invincia had two products. So their base product became the next gen AV machine learning recognizing malware piece. And then kind of the deluxe, like the module that you could add on was the isolation, the app isolation piece. So very smart, I think, doing that because without that acquisition with Sophos wouldn't have happened. And Bromium ended up going to HP for a tiny fraction of the money that they raised.
The other thing too with that experience was just he really brought some great talent over to Sophos via Invincia. I mean, some of the best experiences I had working with data scientists and taking what they were doing and actually being able to present it to the world in a way that was tangible and explain just the whole concept of how machine learning works, the concept of, you put garbage in, you get garbage out.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, some sharp people. I get to chat with a lot of those folks at conferences and on briefing calls. Yeah, definitely. So we've got two upcoming IPOs. One of them is tomorrow. ForgeRock, their IPO, they're getting priced right now. Apparently, the price is higher than they previously expected to be able to do. About normal. I think it's something like 25 a share. Which is fairly normal for a cybersecurity company. I don't know too much about those numbers. That's more Matt Alderman territory. And this will be another one from Matt Alderman's security money watch list that he goes over every now and then on Business Security Weekly. But yeah, they're going public tomorrow on the New York Stock Exchange, not the NASDAQ. Always interesting when we see somebody a cybersecurity company go on New York Stock Exchange. And GitLab announced their IPO as well. S1s are always fun to dig into. GitLab definitely has a strong security story there. They're trying to be your one-stop shop for all your DevOps tooling, your tool chain there, your DevOps workflow. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes as well. All right. I think one of the most interesting stories I've seen this week is Microsoft, at least for their consumer accounts. Your Microsoft, I forget the naming, Microsoft's naming of things just drives me insane. Sometimes I'll try and log into something with my Office 365 password, and it's like, no, you need a Microsoft password. And I'm like, no, this is a Microsoft password. No, we mean a Microsoft.com password. Okay, so I guess that's the one I use for my Xbox, I guess. I get confused.
No, that's your Xbox ID that's tied to your Microsoft
I'll always be
account.
grateful to them for the WUS acronym.
Yes.
WUS? What is that?
Windows
WSUS.
Windows Update Services, right? Is that what it stood for? Yeah.
I've never heard anybody say it WUS. It's great.
I mean, I am a Bostonian, and so
yeah,
that's how I pronounce it.
That is now my preferred pronunciation. Thank you for that, Bill.
But it took milliseconds for everyone on the internet to start having a ha-ha over that when it came out.
Yeah. So the reason I bring them up is you can now get rid of your password. So like with most of mine, I used a Microsoft Authenticator app on my phone, and it sends me, when I try and log in, it sends something to my, very much like a Duo push I get a push notification that says, do you want to approve this login? You can also use TOTP. You can also use security keys, but they now give you the ability to dump your password, to get rid of your password as an authentication option entirely. So
can you use
if they ever get hacked, there's no password to
Can you use that with hello? Is hello a factor in there as well? The facial
yes,
facial
yes,
recognition, right?
It absolutely is. Yeah,
it was kind of funny. My wife was trying to log into her Chromebook, and she couldn't. It was asking her for her G Suite password, and when you log into a Chromebook, like it's not in a browser. It's before you get to that, so she couldn't go look it up in LastPass easily. Right. And I fire up my Windows laptop, and it does the facial recognition, and I'm just logged in. I was like, well, that's kind of interesting usability comparison right there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Google's definitely gone more the security key route than the biometrics. Yeah, it's interesting to see what people have done. Apple is all in on the Face ID stuff.
Yep.
They wanted more real estate on the front of their phones, so they got rid of those fingerprint readers. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Be interesting to see if that starts a trend where other folks start giving you that option too. I wouldn't mind not having to manage a few extra passwords. I would be totally fine with that. Yeah, so another interesting, Daniel Meisler always has some interesting articles, and we've got another one here called It's Time for Vendor Security 2.0. Always an interesting topic when we're talking about security issues in security products, right? That's not so much what this is about. This is more about security questionnaires and the usefulness of security questionnaires, your SIGs, your SIG-Lite, your RFQs, however whatever horrible spreadsheet you email a vendor and tell them to fill out. And they, 2 a.m. in the morning, somebody in sales, bleary-eyed, fills that thing out, sends it back. I don't know how much value folks are getting out of that, but it's one of those things that feels like people just accept as a, cost of doing business type of thing. Like mostly for CYA to say, well, we did, if something happens, they did say this on their vendor questionnaire. So maybe that buys you something with your cyber insurance company or, PR. But very interesting article. I think it's a conversation that definitely needs to happen. There's a few vendors out there now that are trying to make this process simpler, trying to kind of mediate in between with a SaaS product to where vendors can go ahead and fill out these questions ahead of time. Because the frustration you get from the vendor side, and I've had to fill these out, is every single one is going to be customized and different for the most part. So you actually have to read every question, and oftentimes you have to answer it differently. So you can't even use canned answers, even if you're being asked the same question, because you might be getting asked that question a different way. So definitely worth checking out this article. And we need to have this conversation more because it's just one of those things that. Paul, we were talking about this some other point, things that are just everybody agrees it's horrible, but nobody's changing it.
Mm. Yep. I mean, you just summed up cybersecurity in a nutshell.
Well, I mean, it's we just need somebody to figure it out and to build that better product, and everybody just decides, okay. Yeah, kind of like how it happened with Zoom. Zoom was just more reliable and easier to get into than GoToMeeting and WebEx. So, just blows up, comes out of nowhere. And I think that'll happen here when somebody builds the right product. All right.
Will there be an equivalent though of Zoom bombing?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there'll be some kind of trade-off. But yeah, I mean, the argument is that today questionnaires are largely security theater. It's kind of like this also kind of fits in with the security scorecard vendors, right? The BitSights security scorecard, Risk Recon, all those. Where you question if you can really accurately assess the security or the risk of doing business with a company just from external indicators.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much is that SOC 2? How much is that worth to you? How much is ISO 27000 certification really worth? Does that make me less likely to have a breach? I don't know. And finally, for our Squirrel of the Week, we're going to talk about the color white.
Is white a color? White and black are colors?
White is all colors. Black is absence of color.
Glad we clarified.
I thought it was the other way around.
Very important for enterprise security that we clarify.
Not if you're talking about light. If you're mixing water paints together, it is the opposite. If you mix all the water paints together, you will end up with something very dark or black. But if you're talking about light, white I think is all colors.
I'm never going to look at the world the same again.
What if we're talking inkjet printers?
Thank you for that.
Isn't black and inkjet printers the same thing as your watercolor paints? It mixes all the colors together to get black.
Hopefully you're using your black cartridge, because if you're doing that to get black, you're wasting valuable ink.
Right. I think there were printers that were created that way.
Yeah, there are printers that if your black runs out, they'll try and create black, I think, by using the three other colors.
Because then that means you need to buy new cartridges for $8 million.
So this paint, I think, is also going to be pretty valuable. I don't know if it's going to be inkjet printer expensive, but Purdue came up with a white, the whitest paint ever, and the value in producing that is they say it can reflect so much of the energy that hits it. It could be kind of a game changer for painting buildings. So typically you have what's called I think they call it a city heat effect, something like that, city island heat effect, where cities, because of all the concrete absorbs heat. The buildings absorb heat. Typically the temperature in cities is 5% more than anything around it. And the idea here is maybe you could even go without needing air conditioning and stuff like that.
Oh, I did see this story. Yeah.
Buildings with this paint, because it reflects so much of the solar energy.
Right. Yeah, they talked about this for houses too. Like you wouldn't need to cool your house like that. The paint would actually help the cooling effect of the house. Which would be interesting to also paint, having just done the computer build, right, in white. I wonder if that would help also the builds into computers.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe not, because you're generating the heat from an actual source, not from light necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, in those cases, that's where you often see, like if you look under a car, like an expensive luxury car, they're going to have some kind of, gold or aluminum, some kind of metal shielding.
Right.
That directs that heat away from.
Was that a pun in those cases? Is that a pun?
In those cases, no. No.
It was kind of punny.
But yeah, no, I think you could totally use some of those principles and play around with case design and controlling case temperature and stuff like that. Sure. So interestingly, if you've ever read about the Theranos story, fascinating story. They tried to make this little box that you could have in your home, or you could go to Walgreens and they would have one, and it could do like 180 different blood tests in this one little box. And that's one of the issues they had, is that for so many of these tests, some of them you needed a centrifuge, others you needed, other types of tools. Things had to be very temperature controlled. And they said on the inside of that thing, it just looked like a murder scene. There was just blood splattered around everywhere. They couldn't keep the temperature steady between some of these different parts of the inside of the box. Of course, it had this, chic casing that kept all that out of sight. But yeah, it was a big challenge there too. And then part two of this week's Squirrel is an interesting story. Not going to go too deep into it here because we're already running pretty long. But it's Anne-Marie Zedemoyer shared this with me the other day, but I had never heard of this. but it was this really long-running corporate espionage, state-sponsored corporate espionage, where some Chinese companies were trying to steal a recipe for a certain kind of light from DuPont, I think it was. A really interesting story about how they went about it.
A great episode of Darknet Diaries covered the Tesla hack too. Tesla espionage case. Yeah, it was a good episode.
Oh, with the Russian guy?
Yeah.
Am I remembering that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, these are fascinating stories, even if they're not.
Yeah, the one thing I remember from that story is the Russian guy was like befriending all these, people who worked at Tesla and like going on like outings, like you would go out with your friends and go visit somewhere, and they were all trying to take a group photo, and the Russian guy was like, I can't be in any pictures. So if you think you're succumbing to espionage, put that in the back of your mind. Someone doesn't want to be in any pictures.
Yeah, the closest we get to cybersecurity in this one is there's probably some social engineering in here.
Yeah,
because basically this guy was going to ex-DuPont engineers and scientists and stuff like that, and trying to get information out of them that they could use. But that is it, I think, for this week's Enterprise Security Weekly. Thanks so much, Paul and Bill, for joining me today. Really enjoyed the interviews today and the news conversation.